Welcome back to History of the Horn, Part 2. Where we last left off, Anton Hampel had just discovered, I can put my hand in the bell and it changes the color and it changes the intonation. And he also realized that by partially stopping, like half stopping, quarter stop, like 3/4 stopping, or fully stopping the opening of the bell here, that he could actually change the pitch. And this was like, because previously they could only play the notes that were available to them. So he couldn't play a C major scale. The only notes that would be available for a C major scale would be C, E, G, and then C again. Right? So if you wanted to play like half steps, play chromatic things, play just a scale, those weren't available. And so he developed this hand horn technique, which I'm going to try and replicate for you in just a little bit, that enabled the horn player to sort of like fake these other pitches. Okay, so I'm going to play a C major scale for you. It's obviously much more challenging to do hand horn technique with our modern horns. They have huge throats and bells in comparison to natural horns. If we were on campus, I would be able to show you like a real natural horn in the horn studio, but unfortunately we're not, so needs must. But I'm not going to use any of my valves. I'm not going to use the slides. Instead, I'm going to do a combination of mostly stopping and fully stopping notes. The hardest one for me is the D. So we're going to start with C. I'm going to try and put this here so you can see what I'm doing. Yay! So, as I said, the D is kind of the hardest one. So, once Anton Hampel figured this out and he started teaching this hand horn technique, suddenly all the 12 pitches of the chromatic series, all 12 chromatic pitches were available to the horn. So the hand horn technique started to open up doors for the horn. Suddenly, instrument makers had they been continuing to make the horns sound more pleasant indoors, and by the end of the 1700s, horns had become a standardized part of the orchestra. Mozart used 3 horns. He used 2 horns in general. Actually, I misspoke. Mozart used 2 horns in his operas and in his symphonies, and then Beethoven was one of the first to use 3 horns in Eroica, his symphony number 3. And from there, it just kind of people couldn't get enough of the horn. They realized that it was the best instrument, and so it just kept going from there. And then Mahler would use 8 horns. Strauss used 21 horns in Alpine Symphony. So the horn was firmly rooted in the orchestral tradition and was invited inside as an indoor instrument and as a now part of high art culture by the late 18th century and beyond. So the horns that were played in Mozart's time, in Beethoven's time, were all natural horns. They didn't have valves. Valves weren't invented. So valves were invented around 1815.
And I'm also not going to get into piston versus rotor valve. Horns use rotor valves, trumpets use pistons. Some horns in Europe use piston valves. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. But with the advent of the valve, instrument makers started realizing like, oh, maybe we can have like all of the lengths of the different horns, right? Because they had to have like a different length of tubing for every key. Maybe we could figure out a way to put that together in one system. So there were all sorts of strange and weird and wonderful horns that were developed throughout the 1800s. By 1902, some German immigrants, there were 2 major German immigrants who came to the US and totally like changed the landscape of American horn culture world from that point on.
Man,
with the last name of Crosby, helped develop this double horn, which was basically the grandpappy of what all of our American double horns look like. That was in 1902 with the Kahn Company. And then meanwhile in Chicago, there was another German immigrant with the last name of Geyer who also developed a double horn with a different kind of wrap.
And from those two branches, the Crosby wrap and the Geyer wrap, the Crosby style and the Geyer style, have developed two kind of schools of playing within our country. The big Hollywood sound that we associate, or big New York sound that we associate with like the golden age of Hollywood, is, or even current day New York, would be the Kahn school. Big, huge, warm sound. Whereas the Geyer style or Chicago style is much more kind of like laser focused, like has a little more edge to it, a little more bright treble overtones, a little more clarity. So again, there are trends in which school has been more popular throughout the decades. Right now, things are favoring the Geyer wrap. I play a Geyer wrap instrument, but I started out on a Crosby wrap instrument. These are not necessarily critical pieces of information that you need for starting students off in band or orchestra. But I would say that the Geyer wrap instruments are a little bit more efficient in how they're built. And so it could be beneficial to start students on those horns because they slot a little bit easier. Conversely, you could argue that it's better to start students off on something a little more challenging so that when they move on to a better instrument, it feels easier. I think both are valid schools of thought. So that brings us up to current day with the state of the horn. All right, so we've talked a lot about the horn's anatomy, what kind of horns there are, the history of the horn, and you're probably asking yourself, when is she going to get down to the nitty-gritty of how do I teach a student how to hold this thing and play this thing? The time is now. Okay, so how do we hold the instrument? Well, first of all, posture is very important because the three ingredients of sound that we need to play the instrument and make any kind of sound is air, a source of vibration, which for us is the lips against the mouthpiece, and then a resonator, and the whole instrument becomes the resonator. So air is the fuel with a brass instrument, with a wind instrument. So we want to make sure that we have good posture. I think it's important to have both feet flat on the ground, about a shoulder width apart, and to bring the instrument to you. Now I'm a little bit shorter, so I like to sit on the front side of my chair. Some people who have longer legs would prefer to have their back against the chair. As long as the posture is supportive, I don't really mind whether a student is at the front side of the chair or the back side of the chair. Okay, so we bring the instrument to us. Now, depending on the height of the student, how long their torso is, this is now coming into the whole controversy of to play on the knee or to play off the knee, okay? If I bring the instrument to me and I have it on my it's actually the thigh, it's not really the knee, on the leg, it doesn't reach my mouth. That's just the way this instrument is put together and the way I'm put together. This doesn't work for me. So I play off the leg. I also play, so that way I'm sitting with good posture and I bring the instrument up and everything is at a good angle. Now, angle is important. A lot of students who have played mellophone or played trumpet come in and they've got their lead pipe parallel to the floor. This is not helpful for playing horn. The horn is designed to receive air at this kind of angle. I'm not really sure if that's 45 degrees or what, but it's about this way. And then if your student can't bear the weight of the instrument on their hand and it's too heavy for them to hold. Now some of the horns that you'll have in your band room lockers are going to be heavy beasts from days gone by. So you could have some sort of little stool like this. This is something my grandpa carved for me in '05. It's an anatomically incorrect horn, but it's adorable, and he called this my Tudor Jack. So you could have something like that. That would bring the horn up to their faces. Obviously, books would serve this kind of function. There are also yoga cubes that students use. Okay, so that kind of is the on the leg, off the leg situation. It all depends on where the horn hits them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the hand. I've seen beginning band directors tell their students to have the hand resting outside of the bell, or to just have the hand here, or just have the hand willy-nilly wherever. This actually is a part of the instrument. I found this out somewhat recently, like just a few years ago, that horns are built almost a quarter step sharp, knowing that the hand is going to be placed inside the bell. Now, you might be thinking, well, the hand was in the bell so that, according to our history lesson, so that people could change the pitch with their hand and hand horn technique and be able to play different pitches. Why does the hand need to be in the bell now that we have valves? Well, it's a good question. It has to do with the characteristic sound of the horn. And so the hand is in the bell for 4 reasons. Okay, the first reason that the hand is in the bell is for intonation. As I mentioned before, the horn from the factory is pitched about a quarter step sharp. And so having the hand in the bell helps intonation. I also want to show you just how having the hand in the bell can change the pitch. Okay, so if I'm playing something and it's very sharp, for example, if I slightly cover with my hand, I can actually lower the pitch. Okay, so first I'm going to play a pitch with a nice open sound, open hand position. Okay, now as I cover, you'll hear the pitch flatten. And if I were to keep covering, it would actually change the tone. It changes the tone a little bit. I don't know if that comes through on this iPhone camera. So the opposite is also true. If the pitch is too flat, I can open my hand and make the pitch raise. It's pretty cool. So that is, it's a really good tool for the hornist to be able to make very slight adjustments with the pitch with our hand. Okay, and before I go any further, we should talk about what the hand actually looks like inside there. In days gone by, this was the hand position that was taught. A very cupped hand, like you could hold water in this. Okay, so you were also taught to put the hand about here, pretty far in the bell. So this is the problem I have with this hand position. I'm going to play something with this hand position. Okay, now I'm going to play that same little ditty with an open hand position. This kind of looks like, I don't know, like a Barbie hand or a G.I. Joe hand. I don't have any space between my fingers. The thumb can either be on the top here or it can be on the side. And I'm going to put my hand in along the side so that there's an optimum amount of space between my palm and the opposite wall of the horn. All right? Hopefully what's coming through in that is that there's more clarity. It's with this curved hand position and going far inside the bell, it's like I'm talking to you with my mouth, with something covering my mouth. You can still hear me, but it's not as clear as if I did this. When I do this, you can hear me. Everything is really clearly articulated as opposed to this. This sounds covered. This sounds clear. So I like a hand position that is quite flat. Again, I like to think of a Barbie hand or like a G.I. Joe hand, some sort of like doll figurine hand. If a student is playing on the knee, I don't mind if they have their hand on the bottom, that's okay. I prefer a hand position that is against the opposite wall because that makes it really easy for the student to transition if they need to. For example, at St. Olaf, we have students perform standing for their recital pieces. So it's really easy to transition from playing sitting on the leg to standing off the leg, or just playing off the leg all the time. Okay, so how far do we put the hand in there? The hand is kind of like a rudder helping navigate the sound. So if the hand is too far outside of the bell flare, I can't influence this sound at all. If I'm way out here, this is already happening. I have no influence over that sound. If my hand is too far in there, you can imagine obvious problems with that. Again, we come back to a stuffy situation. So I like to have the hand in when I go in on the side, basically going in till I can't go in any further, so that the hand is resting against where it just starts to flare out. So if I were on the bottom, I'd be about there. Here I am there. And now it's important with this hand position to keep the elbow. I tell my students, imagine there is like a big pillow of air between your elbow and your body, because they could have this amazing hand position, but if their elbow comes in against their body, then they have a very covered sound. If the elbow is away from the body, naturally, we don't want chicken wings, right? That's awkward and uncomfortable. But just naturally away from the body, like there's a little pillow there, like a bagpipe drone or something, then that's nice and clear. Okay? So I said that the hand position influences 4 things. The first one is intonation. The second one is the tone color, which we sort of already talked about. We talked about how if the hand position is too covered, it has a really stuffy tone. If the hand position is open, then you have lots of clarity, especially for things that are articulated. If you want the hornists to have a warmer sound, then they can ever so slightly curve their hand position, and that's going to aid in a slightly warmer sound. And sometimes I'll do that if there's a really quiet moment, and I don't want to be too bright, like maybe I'm playing something with low, soft clarinets, then I might cover my hand position just a little bit like that, change my hand position so it's curved. So those are ways that the hand position can influence the color. Okay, so the last reason for having the hand in the bell is so that it can be available to produce special effects. Okay, one of the most common special effects with the horn is stopped horn, which means that we completely seal off the opening of the bell here, and it creates a really cool nasal vibrant effect. Band music uses this quite a bit. Mahler uses this technique quite a bit. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about stopped horn, because this is something you will be having to teach your own students if they're not taking private lessons in the advanced high school level. Okay, so stopped horn simply means, remember we talked about our hand position like this against the opposite wall? So let's pretend that this is the wall, the other wall of the horn. I'm simply going to bring my wrist down so that there's still space here. You seal off this portion, basically creating a seal here, but there's still space. That's really important. Some people think you just shove your hand in the bell. That's not how it works, and you don't get a pleasant sound, and it's really out of tune. You can absolutely play the horn in tune with a great stopped sound and have it speak nice and easy. You just have to figure out where that hand placement is. Okay, so first I'm just going to demonstrate what stop sound sounds like. So here is a horn G, concert C, open. Here it is stopped. So it's really vibrant. It's got that nasal zzz, right? Now, if you want to come around and see, I'm going to play it open and then stopped. Okay, so what happens when we stop the instrument is that we're actually making it shorter. Do you remember what we've talked about before about length and how that corresponds to pitch? I have now made the horn shorter. Basically, we've shortened the instrument about here. And so that means that the pitch is going to rise. So again, I'm going to play that concert C open. And now I'm not going to make any adjustments here. Maybe you noticed before that I was changing the fingering. I'm not going to make any adjustments with the fingering, but I am going to stop it. So here it is open. So that's actually risen by half a step. That means that if there is a printed G on my music and it has a stopped symbol over it, and the composer wants me to play a G, a sounding concert C, but wants me to play a G, I need to make an adjustment, right? Because stopping the horn is going to make the pitch rise by half a step. So that means that I need to compensate for that by fingering down a half step. I need to finger a G flat or F sharp, whatever you want to think, however you want to think of it. So I need to finger an F sharp, knowing that when I stop the horn, the pitch will rise a half step. So an F sharp or G flat is second valve. So now again, I'm going to play it open. And now stopped, but I'm going to finger F sharp. So now you have the same pitch. Okay? Now the hand position that I showed you before is a really nice utilitarian hand position because it's very easy to go from open to stopped and back again. Some students like to have their hands out really far, and so if there are moments in band and orchestra music, it happens pretty frequently actually, where we have to go quickly from stop to open. You can't do that very easily if you're way out here. It's not in tune, it doesn't have good tone, and you can end up like knocking yourself in the teeth. I've done that before. So, stopped horn is the most common effect that you would do with your right hand. There are also really other fun effects that you can do. You can scoop, or go quickly from stop to open, or all sorts of fun things. So it's kind of like, you know how trumpets have like cup mutes and straight mutes and like, I don't know, other mutes that I don't even know. It's all right here for us. Plunger mutes, horn, the hand is everything. This is our flush mute. Maybe that's a word I shouldn't say, but that's what I think of too. Anyhow, just want to briefly talk about some other effects with the horn. If you have the money in your budget to invest in a straight mute, I would highly recommend doing that. Now this particular straight mute is a Marcus Bona. This is kind of middle of the line for a professional grade, so these mutes are about $130 to $150 a piece. That's probably more than you have in your band budget to spend on a straight mute, but even just getting like a basic like Trumcore straight mute would be beneficial. This is really the only mute that high schoolers need to have in their arsenal, and I think that these mutes are also great practice tools. But the mute effect basically just sounds like the horn is coming from far away. So let me just play a little ditty, and I'll do it with muted, stopped, and echo horn, which I'll also tell you about. Okay, here it is muted. With the mute, we do not need to change the fingerings at all, because as you can see, we have not changed the length of the instrument. This is hollow on the inside, so this is basically the same length of the instrument. Okay, now I'm going to play that same ditty stopped. Hopefully I'll transpose it correctly, or that'd be really embarrassing. Okay, so now, echo horn. This is something we almost never encounter except in French music. Echo horn is an effect where you almost stop the horn, but you don't quite seal it. And you actually finger up a half step. So this is gonna hurt my brain. I'm just gonna play it. So here's the G for you again, open. Now I'm gonna finger a half step up and not all the way stop it. Oh my God. This is too hard for me to do right now, but you get the basic idea. I'm not very good at echo horn because I don't use echo horn in real life. Okay, finally there's one fun special effect that I think I've only had to do in a band piece once, which is if you half valve, if you have to press all of the valves, it has like wolf sounds or ghost sounds. Or like ghosts. So those are kind of fun to do. Okay, so we've talked about how to sit, right? We want to have good posture, both feet flat on the floor, legs about shoulder width apart, and then depending on the student, depending on the horn, they would either have the horn on their leg. This is also important. If a student has the horn on the leg, be cognizant about where they're pointing the bell. I see this all the time. This is giving their, what's here, kidney, pancreas, I don't know. It's giving their internal organs a beautiful piece of horn music, but it sounds muted and horrible to everyone else, right? So you want it to turn away from their bodies here, right? Not this way, but just coming along the side. And especially in wintertime when students are wearing lots of layers, make sure that they're pointing that away from their bodies. Good. So then we talked about hand position. We want it to be like a doll figurine hand, right? Not totally flat like that, but just slightly curved like that. And we want it to go in along the opposite wall, away from the player, along the opposite wall, so that there is the optimum amount of space between the palm and the opposite wall from the hand, like this. Then the player needs to make sure that they keep a little pouch of air right here so that that sound continues to be open instead of the elbow coming into the body and it getting really muffled. Okay, so that is how to hold the horn and play the horn in a nutshell. I want to talk a little bit about fingerings and which fingerings I recommend. There's kind of like an American standard that uses mixed fingerings to basically take advantage of the pros of each side. So the pro of using the F side in the middle register is that the F side of the horn has a really warm, beautiful, pure sound. It's beautifully in tune, so we want to take advantage of that. The reason we would use the B flat side, particularly, we like to use the B flat side for the extremities of the range, for the high stuff and the low stuff. But particularly the high stuff, I use the B flat side almost like 100% of the time when I am at the top of the treble staff and above. And the reason I do that is because the B flat horn is shorter than the F horn, right? So if we go back to remembering that harmonic series, remember the fundamental, it starts with the lowest note available on that length, and then there's a pretty wide distance between those first few partials, and then it gets closer and closer together. So with the B flat horn, because it's a shorter length, that fundamental is actually higher than where the F horn's fundamental is, which means that notes that I might play on the F horn, where it lands in the F horn's harmonic series, the partials might be super close together because the B flat horn is shorter. If I play those same pitches, because the horn is shorter, where those pitches lie in the B flat horn's harmonic series, there might actually be more space between those partials. So there's a little more accurate. It's easier to hit those notes. They respond faster, and you have a little more accuracy and consistency. You could think of it another way. You could think of shooting at a target that's like 50 yards away. Maybe that's the F horn, and you can do that pretty well if you practice. And then maybe throwing down the trigger and using B flat fingerings is like bringing that target to like 35 yards away or 25 yards away. So you still have to use skill, you still have to aim, but the target is just closer. So your odds of hitting it have improved, if that makes sense. Now, I like to use the B flat horn also as we go down into the lower range of the instrument, because it does provide some clarity and response that we need. One of the cons of the B flat horn, particularly in the lower range, is that it can sound really honky. And so all we need to do is just adjust the kind of air that we're giving it. Okay, so where do we make that change? I'm gonna be speaking in horn language. So right now, just put yourself into F as the standing key. Okay, so the F below middle C for horns is what I call the swing note. I will play that on the F side of the instrument maybe about 40% of the time, and on the B flat side of the instrument about 60% of the time. So that's the note that kind of is that sliding door, that transition note from the B flat side to the F side. So here is that note. So from there up to G above it, so an octave and a whole step. I'm going to play everything on the F horn. Okay, now at this point where we have G sharp or A flat, that's when I'm going to put down the trigger, and then everything above that is going to be on the B flat horn. And higher. Okay, so let's go back to that F. So now I'm gonna head down into the basement of the horn. And so if I'm gonna keep going down, I like to play these notes on the B flat side. So now I'm gonna play the F using the trigger. And so you may have noticed when I played it on the F side, I used first valve. When I play it with the trigger, it's open. So here's on the F side. And with trigger. So I'm going to play from F to C sharp on the B flat side. Okay, now there at C, I'm going to transition back to F horn and play the next several pitches on the F horn. And then this next note, then the notes below this are not available on the F horn. So we're going to play those on the B flat horn. And then our fundamental, that low C, has to be played on the F side. And I actually need to get a running start. So I'm going to start back at that C below middle C. So that technically is the lowest note that you can play on the horn. I do have some friends who can bend down to like the B and B flat and A below that, which is pretty impressive. I can't do that yet. But I did want to do a little bit of demonstration about the range of the horn. So we have, as I just showed you, we have a pretty low range, right? So that's the fundamental. So from there to, that's an octave. That's 2, that's 3, that's 4. Now, I'm going to play a harmonic series. I'm going to keep going up because this note is not the highest note we can play. On a good day, I can actually go to the F above that. Let's see. We'll see what happens. So I'm just going to do some sirens up, and I'm going to use the harmonic series. So all this that you're hearing are all of the notes that are available on that valve combination. So I'm going to start with RG. Got it. That was almost enough. So maybe I'll have to make a video in a few days when I get that. But you can see the horn has a huge range. I can't think of a better way to demonstrate the horn's range than to play the opening of Richard Strauss's Ein Heldenleben. Here we go. Close enough. Which is why it's obviously the best instrument. So that's my take on fingerings, using the mixed fingerings. But that's a little bit of showing off what the horn can do. And I don't really know how to end this thing.